Ahsoka's first season brought with it tons of questions with very few answers. So what are the top theories around what will be taking place in season 2? And what is it all really about? Welcome to Star Wars Uplink, your place for everything Star Wars gaming, the TV shows, and the movies. Let's jump in.
Just you reconsider playing that message for him.
I'd say my favorite part about Ahsoka, the first season, was the variety of theories we all had around it. I think that was a great part of the show. And it really, I felt like it was one of the rare instances of a Star Wars show where it like unified the whole fandom around the various points and discussions around Star Wars. And now getting into season 2, I think the theorizing is going to start heating up. So Dave Filoni behind the scenes is still working on the TV show. He's still writing it and planning things out. And then I think it'll probably be later this year, maybe early next year, that we actually start seeing any movement on that. But Ahsoka Season 2 is actually going to be a big piece in the overall puzzle that is Star Wars.
Yeah, we've kind of talked about it with like upcoming movies and just different things. It seems like this is going to... Not that they're going to Marvelize this, but it does seem like it has a bit of a piece of that where like Mandalorian's already kind of connected and different things. So it's probably going to become more and more like that. So there's definitely some potential for exciting things to get thrown in.
Yes.
That could really shake things up for Star Wars.
Yeah, I feel like Ahsoka Season 2 is actually going to be the, like you said, almost like the MCU moment. This might be the Captain America and then the Iron Man movies or vice versa of the Mandoverse. We had the Mandalorian that kind of cracked open this time frame in between the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy. And now that we're getting deeper into it, we're going to see an expansion into that timeline. We've already begun to see that expansion with Mandalorian seasons 1, 2, 3, and Book of Boba Fett, and now Ahsoka season 1 taking place around the same time frame in that galaxy. Well, that time frame, they're playing really fast and loose with the timelines because they have a lot of stories that they want to tell, and they don't want that time frame to actually get much further in. There's a lot of stuff that they still have to prep and place and move forward. There's the whole Thrawn piece that they need to start making him a bigger threat
For sure.
for him to ultimately get into the movies and become the big bad of this movie structure.
Yeah.
And I feel like they need to start making him the Thanos of Star Wars, if we're going to put it in MCU terms. Now, personally, I want Star Wars to be Star Wars and not Marvel.
Yeah.
But there's some good learning pieces that they can actually take from Marvel and put it into Star Wars and make sure it works in Star Wars.
And I think one of those pieces is having good bad guys. I think Star Wars has really relied a bit too heavily on Palpatine just being the bad guy because
he is the only bad guy.
He is the only bad guy. Yeah, it's just him and whoever else he's training. Those are the bad guys. So it's kind of a hard thing for them to be introducing Thrawn because it's like, who knows of him other than the people who have delved deep into the books and lore and stuff like that. And technically another piece that they're going to have to do in Ahsoka, or at least the Mandoverse time frame, is start making the Palpatine rise make sense. That's what a lot of Bad Batch was doing earlier on, was like laying down the foundations of like, hey, cloning and Palpatine, those are things that are happening. Now, they didn't actually do much with that story. No, they could have done a lot more.
They just kind of closed it down and basically said,
touched on it, and they're like, yeah, it's there, and we're not going any further with it. It's like, okay. But
Palpatine's doing this, but not this way.
Yeah. It was, we all thought like, oh, maybe we're going to get some insight into like, kind of the beginnings of this whole... Nope, that whole facility is now gone. Okay.
But this is a topic that they kind of need to start hinting at behind the scenes. I don't think they need to explicitly say this is the rise of Palpatine's story or Palpatine, a Star Wars story or what have you. Like, I don't think they need to make it that explicit, but there needs to start being breadcrumbs laid down.
Yeah, rumors, just whispers... Or like just...
Thrawn's a good person for that because he is the heir to the Empire. Like he is this person that is taking on the crumbling Empire and trying to make it something bigger.
And although Thrawn doesn't have a good social reputation, I would say, like as far as like interpersonal relationships,
yes,
he knows people really well. So anything,
and can read them very well.
And can read them very well. He knows histories and things like that. So I think he could come. He has a good understanding of Palpatine. He's met Palpatine multiple times. And
he discovered Palpatine's hidden plans many times. Like he discovered the Death Star before the Death Star was even known by many of the Empire.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like, if anything, not that Thrawn would give way to what Palpatine's thinking, but at least he would know of Palpatine's kind of existence and like plans and things that he's dabbling in, sort of thing. So it's like there could be something there that we could get a little nudge about Palpatine doing something interesting, like something. I don't know, just give us a little breadcrumb, just something.
Yes. And like there's that side of theories, but another theory that has been floating around is actually around Baylan and his search on this new planet. And I think this is the biggest theory and discussion piece that was in the Ahsoka season 1 like realm. And it was like, what is actually Baylan's goal on this planet? He's obviously looking for something. Obviously there is something behind the scenes, behind the surface or underneath the surface of this planet. There's something deeper going on here, with this being like the birthplace of the Night Sisters, and this being like the origin of some pieces of the Force, and how this is the realm that legends were told about. This is honestly like they're setting this galaxy or this part of the universe or what have you, however you want to describe it, like this separate galaxy, as almost the Legends area. This is where some of the wilder things in the Star Wars universe could actually take place. And I feel like this is something that a lot of people are starting to wonder around. Like, is this Abeloth that's here? Is this just a deeper meaning of the Force? Is this, obviously there are the family members, like the Mortis gods statues are here. Somehow, some way, there is something with the Force deeper than any of us even think or know about at this time frame.
And whatever it is, it's sleeping very deeply, because it seems that everything is kind of dying on this planet.
Yes.
So either it's something rather evil that is sucking all the life out of it, or it's something that's just asleep. Could be evil, could be good, could be neither, could just be neutral.
Yeah, it could just be like the embodiment of the Force, like in its purest form.
Right. But regardless, it's inevitably going to be something pretty powerful, as long as it is something,
Yeah. I mean, mentioning the idea of like sucking the life out of this planet, there is something in the High Republic that people have theorized that actually might come into play with this time frame. And it makes sense for them to almost be like sleeping behind the surface on this separate galaxy, or in the separate galaxy. And it's this idea around the Nameless. And the Nameless are this beast or kind of tool that the Nihil use in the High Republic. And the High Republic, there aren't necessarily like Sith bad guys, because they technically aren't supposed to be that visible in the galaxy. But the Nihil are like this force from the outer rim, and they are looking to combat the Jedi. Yeah, the Marauders, known as the Nihil. And they're basically working against the Jedi Order and what their goals are in the galaxy. And in the High Republic, they actually released this thing called, it's this creature called the Nameless, or they've dubbed them the Nameless, which is a terrifying name, but by calling them the Nameless, they do become named. So like, I don't know how that actually works, but besides the point.
Paradox.
They are shown to feed on the Force itself, which paralyze the Jedi themselves, and then basically reduce them to stone husks when that power is drained from them.
The Jedi themselves.
The Jedi themselves.
Oh, wow.
So these creatures honestly could be, they don't necessarily have to be these kinds of things, but it is a theory that maybe the thing that is on this planet that's actually pulling some of the life out of this planet is something along those lines. Maybe not necessarily the Nameless, but something similar on this galaxy. And that's what forced the Jedi to leave this realm.
Interesting. Okay. Huh. I could see it. I could see something of this nature. Do I think they're going to completely make it the Nameless? Probably not. I feel like Dave Filoni's going to just want to do his own thing, but you could definitely take inspiration. Why would Balin be trying to find them, though?
I mean, that's the real question. But in the High Republic books, like one thing I should also note, they're said to hail from the planet X. Elon Musk write this? The planet is described as a nexus for both light and dark sides of the Force, which is similar to like how they describe Mortis. And many have theorized that Balin is actually seeking the nameless on Pridia, given the planet's connection to the Mortis gods, and that possibly. This is where I think it like stretches a little bit.
Okay.
Balin wants to basically bring about the end of the Force itself. That he wants to be able to claim the power of the Force for himself. And I think that kind of makes sense if you like look at the things that he says of like this is the opportunity for like immense power to be gained.
Yeah.
And there's potential here. That could be in reference to him actually looking for something that could actually destroy the Force as we know it, or at least minimize the Force across the galaxy, and then he could wield that power.
I could see that because he has been showing this very stoic, like in the world's not in balance sort of thing. He's definitely been kind of preaching more on the it's not about having this power sort of thing, or it's like if whenever someone does have this power, it's abused. There's kind of that feeling to his outlook. So I could definitely see him looking for something that will just either eliminate it or like even the playing out. Interesting. Okay. I'm not sure that the Nameless would be the way to go, but
yeah, I like this tie into the High Republic because they're clearly like going deeper into the High Republic, but I don't necessarily know if it makes sense. They'd have to do a lot of like hand waving of like this is something that happened here because it's a very niche piece of like the High Republic era and the books there, and then like going on that similar route, the Bendu is something that many have theorized as well, with this idea of the so-called one in the middle of the Force could honestly be someone or something waiting at the end of the path. Like this is something that Balin is looking for. Like he clearly embodies like both sides of the arguments around like the light and the dark and sees value in both of them. Clearly he was a Jedi, and he's not described as a Sith, he's described as a dark Jedi. And I think that just adds so much like deepening lore and layers to his character that clearly come across on screen. Like there's definitely more to that story. So I wonder if like his true motivation is to meet and maybe become the one in the middle, become like the father figure. If we look at the Mortis gods,
Okay, so his possible goal. Here's what we're theorizing.
These are all theories.
Yeah, we're just theorizing here. But so a possible goal would be to find one of these great Force wielders that are neither good nor bad, and maybe become the father, or like, is that what we're thinking here, or is it more of just to find this being of Force wielding essence, and then what?
I think as we've seen, like obviously there's bits and pieces. We don't have a whole lot of story around Balin, and I don't know how deep they're going to go in that direction. But I think a big motivator of Balin is his belief that there's more to the Force than just light side and dark side, and that there is something deeper going on, and tying itself to like the Mortis gods and Bendu, and like these ideas of like characters that are outside of the Force, almost like outside of what we see as good and evil. There is this almost third path where they kind of like step outside of that war. They see the Force as just itself, nothing like the fact that this is good or the fact that this is evil is just a perspective of people on those paths and the decisions that they make. And I think that is an interesting story. I also think it kind of breaks George Lucas's original intention with the Force. Of like the idea around the Force is a tool and a belief system around what's good and what's bad. And also like following the storyline of like very Joseph Campbell-esque with once you start going down the path of the hero, these are the things that will happen.
Right.
But also these are the things that happen for the path of the villain. And that once you have these steps, like once you start getting corrupted with this massive amount of power, you will end up failing. Like that is the kind of thing. There is no like, I'm going to touch this part of the Force and like just do it there. No, you're going to be corrupted by that piece no matter how far you get there.
Right.
There is paths for redemption, but once you go down that path, you're on that path. So I do wonder how they're actually going to get that piece of like the lore, and the core piece of the Force is there's good and there's bad, or there's light and there's dark. Like that's a key part of George Lucas's view on the Force. But I do find it very fascinating to bring this very human perspective of like someone outside of those beliefs.
I like it. I like the exploration of not necessarily a more neutral Force, but of
it's
just
almost
a different
like pure
perspective. Yeah, of like a returning to what it essentially is, Force, nature sort of thing.
Yeah. It's like the religion of the Force, both like the Jedi and the Sith is a prism. And then these characters like the Mortis gods and the balance on that side of things and the Bendu, like this is a character that steps outside of the Force,
right,
and is like the original light that hits the prism before it gets refracted into all the various like pieces. Like now we have the thread of like this thread power that was introduced in the Acolyte.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see if it's like human error. For the Force to become what it is, like what we know of it really today, like especially in the sequels and the original trilogy and whatnot. It's like they're, as a human, you cannot help but break it into good and evil, and like I think it'd be cool if they like still play with that, where it's like as good of intentions or as neutral as intentions as Balin had. It still corrupts him. It still
it fails
ruins.
Because of the human element, not because of the Force element.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's a really fascinating thread that they could actually pull on, is like showcasing that the corruption of the Force is a very human aspect. Because when you look at the Force and what it's made of, it's every living being and every living person.
It is nature. It is what it is, and it's uncorruptible. So it's only when you get it. It's only when you take that control for yourself that, as humans, we change things.
Yeah, you can be a vessel of the Force, which is what the Jedi intend to be, and then you can wield the Force, which is what the Sith do.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a fascinating perspective on this idea of the Force. Like, how can we actually go into these directions and kind of pare it back? And I think that's going to be the most interesting piece around Ahsoka Season 2, as they're on as they're on this separate galaxy within the Star Wars universe. This is something that I think they can play around with very interestingly, and ultimately like set up the foundation for what James Mangold's Star Wars movie is going to be, with the origins of the Jedi, like that first Jedi story. I think this is a perfect idea to just really capitalize on these core beliefs of Star Wars and make them more of this web and perspective, and really just deepen that belief, because the Force is the Force, and then the Jedi, utilizing the same power, have these abilities, and the Sith, wielding that same power, have these abilities. The Force stays the same throughout it all.
Right.
It's just the perspective of those using it.
I think there could be something there. Do I actually believe they're going to really dive into that in Ahsoka? Probably not. But I'd love to see that. I think there's potential because of Balin and what his different perspective and his goals that we don't really know what it is. That's why we have all these theories. But it's there. It could be. And we seem to be having this kind of discussion around, especially around like the Dawn of the Jedi stuff coming out and all that. So
there is so much here, and there's tons of different stories here. One that I want to kind of like end this discussion with is the Zepho. I love the story of the Zepho in the Jedi games. Like, you have these beings that are like very alien, but they're utilizing the Force in technology. They're utilizing the Force in so many different ways, and utilizing the Force as a tool for discovery and not so much as a tool for control. I love this idea because they just seem to be so focused on discovery and education throughout the galaxy. And because of that discovery and education, they end up like just kind of petering out. And there's just threads of them throughout the galaxy as they learned more and more and laid the foundation of what we see in the Force. I think the Zepho are such an interesting piece because it is very much like Indiana Jones inspired. Like, anytime that you stumble upon something with the Zepho, it's like discovering this ancient civilization that you don't necessarily know how they built these things or how they got there. It is just like this piece of the galaxy that is so interesting. Like, it's a core foundation, but it's just one stone in like this bigger construction.
I like that. I really like seeing where they've taken like different aspects of, not necessarily of the Force, but like of these, like of this human error, and how they take it differently. Like, so the Jedi decided to make it more of a religious thing and become in tune with it by being masters of themselves, sort of thing. The Sith kind of go off with it and to become masters of power and to be able to control others with it. And then the Zepho, it's like, we just want to use this to know more, like, or to have knowledge, to spread, to, it's so good. I love seeing the different ways that they can use the Force. Like, it's not just good and evil. It's a sandbox. Like, this is literally like we could do whatever we want to do. Like, it's not just black and white. We could actually do something different with it. For pure, for ill. It's just how they run with it, you know?
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
I also love like the piece around the Zepho that's really fascinating is this piece of their story that the Zepho were affected by the dark side thanks to a sage named Kujid. And after that, they disappeared into unknown regions in search of peace. So because of this like corruption of the dark side and the power of the Force on that part of things, they ended up like discovering this piece of themselves that they didn't actually know or realize. And then they said, oh crap, this is probably not good for us. Let's leave and search for peace. So that could be the tie-in to how either the Zepho or Zepho technology or Zepho structures could have made it to Peridea.
I like that.
So many different things. There's also a theory around like the world between worlds and how this could be like a nexus point, like a physical nexus point for the world between worlds, which I also think is great. I think no matter what direction that they hold, Peridea and this part of the galaxy is going to be a realm that is pieces or physical embodiments of the Force.
I could see it.
But let us know what your thoughts are on all of these theories in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube, or contact uplinkpodcast.com if you're listening to this wherever you find podcasts. As always, thank you for listening, and may the Force be with you.